Ladislaus IV Vasa, Polish, Ladislaus IV Waza, Latin, Vladislaus IV Vasa or Ladislaus IV Vasa, Lithuanian, Vladislovas Vaza. The 9th of June 1595, the 20th of May 1648, was a Polish prince from the royal house of Vasa. He reigned as King of Poland and Grand Duke of Lithuania from the 8th of November 1632 to his death in 1648. Ladislaus IV was the son of Sigismund III Vasa, Polish, Zygmunt III Waza, and his wife, Anna of Austria, also known as Anna of Habsburg. In 1610 the teenaged Vladislaus was elected Tsar of Russia by the Seven Boyars, but did not assume the Russian throne due to his father's opposition and a popular uprising in Russia. Nevertheless, until 1634 he used the title of Grand Duke of Muscovy. Elected King of Poland in 1632, Ladislaus was fairly successful in defending the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth against invasion, most notably in the Smolensk War of 1632–34, in which he participated personally. He supported religious tolerance and carried out military reforms, such as the founding of the Commonwealth Navy. He was also a renowned patron of the arts and music. He failed, however, to realize his dreams of regaining the Swedish crown, gaining fame by conquering the Ottoman Empire, strengthening royal power, and reforming the Commonwealth. He died without a legitimate male heir and was succeeded to the Polish throne by his half-brother, John II Casimir Vasa, Jan Kazimierz Waza. Ladislaus' death marked the end of relative stability in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, as conflicts and tensions that had been growing over several decades came to a head with devastating consequences, notably the largest of the Cossack uprisings, the Khmelnytsky uprising, 1648, and the Swedish invasion, the Deluge, 1655–60. In Latin, Vladislaus Quartus de Gratia Rex Polonia, Magnus Dux Lithuaniae, Russi, Prussi, Masovia, Samogishi, Livoniac, Neccanon Sucorum, Gottorum Vandalorum Hereditarius Rex, Electus Magnus Dux Muscovy. In English, Ladislaus IV, by grace of God the King of Poland, Grand Duke of Lithuania, Ruthenia, Prussia, Masovia, Samogitia, Livonia, and hereditary King of the Swedes, Goths and Vandals, elected Grand Duke of Muscovy. In 1632 Ladislaus Zygmunt was a JGL and was elected King of Poland. By paternal inheritance, he legally succeeded as King of Sweden. His titles were the longest of any Polish king ever. Life. Ladislaus IV's father, Sigismund III Vasa, grandson of Sweden's King Gustav I, had succeeded his father to the Swedish throne in 1592, only to be deposed in 1599 by his uncle, subsequently King Charles IX. This resulted in a long-standing feud, with the Polish kings of the House of Vasa claiming the Swedish throne. This led to the Polish-Swedish War of 1629 and later to the Deluge of 1655. The marriage of Anne of Austria to Sigismund III was a traditional, politically motivated marriage, intended to tie the young House of Vasa to the prestigious Habsburgs. Ladislaus was born the 9th of June 1595 at the king's summer residence in Lobsow, near Krakow, a few months after the main wall castle had been consumed by fire. Ladislaus' mother died on the 10th of February 1598, less than 3 years after giving birth to him. He was raised by one of her former ladies of the court, Ursula Mayryn. Ursula eventually became a powerful player at the royal court, with much influence. Ladislaus' hofmeister was Michał Konieski, a Polish-Prussian noble. Around early 17th century Ursula lost much of her influence, as Ladislaus gained new teachers and mentors, such as priests Gabriel Prawinckius, Andrzej Zolski and Marek Letkowski, and in the military matters, Zygmunt Kazanowski. Much of his curriculum was likely designed by priest Piotr, much respected by Sigismund III. Ladislaus studied for several years in the Krakow Academy, and for 2 years, in Rome. At the age of 10 Ladislaus received his own prince court. Ladislaus formed a friendship with Adam Kazanowski and his brother, Stanislaw. It is reported that young Ladislaus was interested in arts, Later this led to him becoming an important patron of arts. He spoke and wrote in German, Italian and Latin. Ladislaus was liked by Szlachta, Polish nobility. However, his father's plans to secure him the throne of Poland, Viventirage, were unpopular and eventually crushed in the Zebrzydowski rebellion, Rokosz. With the intensification of the Polish intervention in Muscovy, in 1609, the royal family moved to their residence in Vilnius, capital of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. There he witnessed the fire of Vilnius, an event which even required the royal family to evacuate their residence in the Vilnius castle. Shortly afterwards, that year, Vladislav, aged 15, was elected Tsar by Muscovy's aristocracy council of 7 boyars, who overthrew Tsar Vasily Shuisky during the Polish-Muscovite War and Muscovy's time of troubles. His election was ruined by his father, Sigismund, who aimed to convert Muscovy's population from Orthodox religion to Catholicism. Sigismund refused to agree to the boyars' request to send Prince Ladislaus to Moscow and his conversion to Orthodoxy. Instead, Sigismund proposed that he should reign as a regent in Muscovy instead. This unrealistic proposal led to a resumption of hostilities. Briefly, beginning in 1610, Ladislaus struck Muscovite silver and gold coins, kopek, in the Russian mints in Moscow and Novgorod with his titulary Tsar and Grand Prince Vladislav Zygmuntovich of all Russia. Ladislaus tried to regain the Tsar's throne himself, organizing a campaign in 1616. Despite some military victories, he was unable to capture Moscow. The Commonwealth gained some disputed territories in the Truce of Dulino, but Vladislaus was never able to reign in Russia. The throne during this time was instead held by Tsar Michael Romanov. He held on to the title, without any real power, until 1634. Likely, the failure of this campaign showed Ladislaus the limits of royal power in Poland, as major factors for the failure included significant autonomy of the military commanders, which did not see Ladislaus as their superior, and lack of funds for the army, as the Polish parliament, Sejm, refused to subsidize the war. Before he was elected king of the Commonwealth, Ladislaus fought in many campaigns, seeking personal glory. After his final campaign against Russians in 1617 to 1618, the end of Dimitriades, in 1619 he went to Silesia, looking for an opportunity to aid the Habsburgs in their struggle against the Czech Hussites in the 30 Years' War. That opportunity never came, but from that point onward, Ladislaus had a good relationship with George William, Elector of Brandenburg. The following year Ladislaus took part in the second phase of the Polish-Ottoman War, a consequence of the long series of struggles between Poland and the Ottomans over Moldavia. In 1621 Ladislaus was one of the Polish commanders at the Battle of Chosim. Reportedly he was struck ill. But despite that, he proved a voice of reason, convincing other Polish commanders there to stay and fight. His advice was correct, and the battle eventually ended with a peace treaty that returned the status quo from before the Ottoman invasion. This peace treaty also gave Ladislaus an international reputation as a defender of Christian faith, and increased his popularity in the Commonwealth itself. In 1623, while near Gdansk, Danzig, he witnessed the arrogant attitude of Gustavus Adolphus, whose navy took opportunity of its sea superiority to demand concessions from Gdansk. Commonwealth had no navy. In 1624 King Sigismund decided the time has come for Ladislaus to travel, like many of his peers, to Western Europe. For security reasons, Ladislaus traveled under a fake name, Snopkowski, from Polish Snopek, meaning sheaf, as seen in the Vasa's coat of arms. In his voyage, 1624 to 1625, he was accompanied by Albrecht Stanislaw Radziwiłł and other, less notable courtiers. First, he traveled to Wrocław, Breslau, then Munich, where he met Maximilian I, Elector of Bavaria. In Brussels he met Infanta Isabella Clara Eugenia of Spain. In Antwerp, Rubens. Near Breda he met Ambrosio Spinola. It was during his stay with Spinola that he was impressed by the Western military techniques. This was later to be reflected when he became king. Military matters were always important to him. While not a military genius, and surpassed by his contemporary, Commonwealth hetman Stanislaw Koniepolski, Ladislaus was known as a fairly skillful commander on his own. In Rome, he was welcomed by Pope Urban VIII, who congratulated him on his fighting against the Ottomans. During his stay in Florence, he was impressed by opera, and decided to bring this form of art to the Commonwealth, where it was previously unknown. In Genoa and Venice he was impressed by the local shipyards, and in Pisa he witnessed a specially organized mock naval battle, experiences which resulted in his later attempt to create the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth Navy. After returning to Poland, in 1626 he fought against the Swedes in the last phase of the Polish-Swedish War, where in 1626 he took part in the Battle of New. His involvement in this conflict, which lasted till the Truce of Almack in 1629, was rather limited, and he spent much time in other parts of the country. During that period and afterward, he lobbied for support of his candidature for the Polish throne, as his father, Sigismund, was getting more advanced in his age, and the succession to the Polish throne did not occur through inheritance but rather, through the process of royal elections. While Ladislaus, and his father Sigismund, tried to ensure Władysław's election during Sigismund's life, this was not a popular option for the nobility, and it repeatedly failed, up to and including at the Sejm of 1631. The sudden heart attack that Sigismund suffered on the 23rd of April 1632, and his death in the morning hours of 30 April, forced the issue to be taken up again. The election Sejm of 1632 eventually concluded in the election of Ladislaus. He had no serious other contenders. The decision on who would be the Commonwealth's next king was reached on 8 November, but as the Püktürkonvente were not yet ready, the official announcement was delayed until 13 November. In the Püktürkonvente, Ladislaus pledged himself to fund a military school and equipment, to find a way to fund a naval fleet, to maintain current alliances, not to raise armies, give offices or military ranks to foreigners, negotiate peace treaties or declare war without the Sejm's approval, not to take a wife without the Senate's approval, to convince his brothers to take an oath to the Commonwealth, and to transfer the profits from the royal mint to the royal treasury rather than to a private treasury. When the election result had been announced by the Crown Grand Marshal, Łukaszoplinski, the nobility, Szlachta, who had taken part in the election, began festivities in honor of the new king, which lasted 3 hours. Ladislaus was crowned in the Wall Cathedral, in Krakow on 6 February in the following year. In an attempt to take advantage of the confusion expected after the death of the Polish king, Tsar Michael of Russia ordered an attack on the Commonwealth. A Muscovite army crossed the Commonwealth eastern frontier in October 1632 and laid siege to Smolensk, which was ceded to Poland by Russia in 1618. At the end of the Dimitriad Wars, in the war against Russia in 1632 to 1634, the Smolensk War, Ladislaus succeeded in breaking the siege in September 1633 and then in turn surrounded the Russian army under Mikhail Shane, which was then forced to surrender on the 1st of March 1634. It was during that campaign that Ladislaus started the modernization program of the Commonwealth Army, emphasizing the usage of modern infantry and artillery. Ladislaus proved to be a good tactician, and his innovations in the use of artillery and fortifications based on Western ideas greatly contributed to the eventual Polish-Lithuanian success. King Ladislaus wanted to continue the war, because the Polish-Swedish Treaty of Almack would soon be expiring, ally with the Russians to strike against Sweden. However, the Sejm wanted no more conflict. As Stanislaw Lubianski, the Bishop of Plock, wrote 2 weeks after Shane's surrender, "Our happiness is in remaining within our borders, guaranteeing health and well-being." The resulting Peace of Polianów, Treaty of Polano, favorable to Poland, confirmed the pre-war territorial status quo. Muscovy also agreed to pay 20,000 rubles in exchange for Ladislaus' renunciation of all claims to the tsardom and return of the royal insignia, which were in the Commonwealth possession since the Dimitriads. Following the Smolensk campaign, the Commonwealth was threatened by another attack by the Ottoman Empire. During the wars against Ottomans in 1633 to 1634, Ladislaus moved the Commonwealth army south of the Muscovy border, where under the command of Hetman Stanislaw Koniuszewski it forced the Turks to renew a peace treaty. In the resulting treaty, both countries agreed again to curb the border raids by Cossacks and the Tatars, and the Ottomans confirmed that the Commonwealth to be an independent power, and had not to pay tribute to the empire. After the southern campaign, the Commonwealth had to deal with a threat from the north, as the armistice, ending the Polish-Swedish War, 1600 to 1629, was expiring. The majority of Polish nobles preferred to solve the problem through negotiations, unwilling to pay taxes for a new war, provided that Sweden was open to negotiations and concessions, in particular, to retreat from the occupied Polish coastal territories. Ladislaus himself was hoping for a war, which could yield some more significant territorial gains, and even managed to gather a sizable army, with navy elements, near the disputed territories. Sweden, weakened by involvement in the 30 Years' War, was however open to a peaceful solution. Ladislaus could not go against the decision of the Sejm and Senate, and agreed to support the treaty. Thus both sides agreed to sign the Armistice of Stunsdorf, Stamskowise, on the 12th of September 1635, favorable to the Commonwealth, which regained the Prussian territories, and called for a reduction of the Swedish tolls on the maritime trade. In the 3 months between his election and coronation, Ladislaus sounded the waters regarding the possibility of a peaceful succession to the Swedish throne, following the recent death of Gustavus Adolphus, but this, as well as his proposal to mediate between Sweden and its enemies, was rejected, primarily by the Swedish Chancellor and head of the Regency Council, Axel Oxenstierna. Ladislaus IV owed nominal allegiance to the Imperial Habsburgs as a member of the Order of the Golden Fleece. His relationship with the Habsburgs was relatively strong, although he was not above carrying some negotiations with their enemies. Like France, he refused Cardinal Richelieu's 1635 proposal of an alliance and a full-out war against them. Despite potential lure of territorial gains in Silesia, he realized that such a move would cause much unrest in a heavily Catholic Commonwealth, that he likely lacked the authority and power to push such a change of policy through the Sejm, and that the resulting conflict would be very difficult. From 1636 onward, for the next few years, Ladislaus strengthened his ties with the Habsburgs. In the meantime, Ladislaus still tried to take a leading role in European politics, and negotiate a peaceful settlement to the 30 Years' War, a settlement which he hoped would ease his way into regaining the Swedish crown. Following the Armistice of Stunsdorf, Ladislaus came to increasingly realize that his prospects for regaining the Swedish throne were dim. In the years 1636 to 1638 he proposed several reforms to strengthen his and his dynasty's power in the Commonwealth. His first plan was an attempt to secure a hereditary province within the country, which would not be threatened by the possible power shift following a future royal election. This, however, did not gain sufficient support in the Sejm. Next, Ladislaus attempted to create an order of chivalry, similar to the Order of the Golden Fleece, but this plan was scuttled down as well, with the Szlachta and the magnates seeing this as an attempt to create a royal, loyalist elite, and traditionally opposing anything that could lead to the reduction of their extensive power. Popular vote and opposition also resulted in the failure of the plan to raise taxes from trade tariffs. Here it was not only the nobility but even the merchants and burghers from towns, like Danzig, who were able to muster enough support, including from foreign powers, to stop the king's reforms. In fact, the defeat of his plans was so total, that he was forced to make certain conciliatory gestures to the nobility, as the Sejm passed several laws constraining his authority, such as to hire foreign troops, further indicating the limits of royal power in the Commonwealth. Marriages. Early in his reign, there were plans regarding a marriage of Ladislaus and Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia, Princess Palatine, daughter of Frederick V, Elector Palatine. This was however unpopular, both with Catholic nobles and the Catholic Church, and when it became clear to Ladislaus that this would not convince the Swedes to elect him to their throne, this plan, with quiet support from Ladislaus himself, was dropped. Ferdinand II, Holy Roman Emperor's proposal of marriage between Ladislaus and Archduchess Cecilia Renata of Austria, sister of future Ferdinand III, Holy Roman Emperor, arrived in Warsaw somewhere during spring 1636. In June that year, Vladislaus sent Jerzy Ossoliński to the imperial court, to work on improving the imperial Commonwealth relations. The king's trusted confessor, Father Walerian Magni, a Franciscan religious order, and Voivode Kasper Doenhoff arrived in Regensburg, Polish, Ratisbona, on the 26th of October 1636 with consent and performed negotiations. The Archduchess dowry was agreed for 100,000 zlotys. The emperor also promised to pay the dowries of both of Sigismund III's wives, Anna and Constance. Additionally, the son of Ladislaus and Cecilia Renata was to obtain the Duchy of Opoland-Rysaporz in Silesia, Duchy of Opoland-Rysaporz. However, before everything was confirmed and signed, Ferdinand II died and Ferdinand III backed from giving the Silesian duchy to the son of Ladislaus. Instead, a dowry was awarded to be secured by the Bohemian estates of Drebin. On the 16th of March 1637 a family alliance was signed between the Habsburgs and the Polish branch of the House of Vasa. Ladislaus promised not to sign any pacts against the Habsburgs, and to transfer his rights to the Swedish throne in case of his line's extinction. In return, Habsburg promised to support his efforts to regain the Swedish crown, and to transfer to him some territory in case of gains in a war against the Ottomans. The marriage took place in 1637, on 12 September. The next few years were similarly unsuccessful with regards to his plans. Eventually, he tried to bypass the opposition in the Sejm with secret alliances, dealings, and intrigues, but did not prove successful. Those plans included schemes such as supporting the Holy Roman Emperor's raid on Inflanty in 1639, which he hoped would lead to a war, an attempted alliance with Spain against France in 1640–1641, and in 1641–1643, with Denmark against Sweden. On the international scene, he attempted to mediate between various religious factions of Christianity, using the tolerant image of the Commonwealth to portray himself as the neutral mediator. He organized a conference in Thorn, that begun on the 28th of January 1645, but had failed to reach any meaningful conclusions. After Cecilia's death in 1644, the ties between Ladislaus and the Habsburgs were somewhat loosened. In turn, the relations with France improved, and eventually Ladislaus married the French princess Ludwika Maria Gonzaga de Nevers, daughter of Karol I Gonzaga, Prince Nevers, in 1646. Ladislaus's last plan was to orchestrate a major war between the European powers and the Ottoman Empire. The border with the empire was in a near-constant state of low-level warfare. Some historians estimate that in the first half of the 17th century, Ottoman raids and wars resulted in the loss, death or enslavement, of about 300,000 Commonwealth citizens in the borderlands. The war, Ladislaus hoped, would also solve the problem of unrest among the Cossacks, a militant group living in the Ukraine, near the Ottoman border, who could find worth in such a campaign, and turn their attention to fighting for the Commonwealth, instead of against it. As usual, he failed to inspire the nobility, rarely willing to consider sponsoring another war, to agree to this plan. He received more support from foreign powers, from Rome, Venice and Muscovy. With the promise of funds for the war, Ladislaus started recruiting troops among the Cossacks in 1646. The opposition of the Sejm, demanding that he dismiss the troops, coupled with Ladislaus's worsening health, crippled that plan as well. Ladislaus still did not give up, and attempted to resurrect the plan in 1647, and with support of magnate Jeremy Wisniewski, who organized military exercises near Ottoman border, attempted unsuccessfully to provoke the Ottomans to attack. On the 9th of August 1647, his young son, then 7 years old, fell ill and died. The death of his only legitimate heir was a major blow to the king. Death. While hunting near Merkin, Mirets, in early 1648, Ladislaus suffered from a case of gallstone or kidney stone. His condition worsened due to an incorrect medication. He was conscious that those are his final days, and had time to dictate his last will and receive last rites. Ladislaus died around 2 a.m. on the night from 19 to the 20th of May 1648. His heart and viscera were interred in the chapel of St. Casimir of Vilnius Cathedral. He had no legitimate male heirs. He was succeeded by his half-brother John II Casimir Vasa. Character: Ladislaus has been described as outgoing and friendly, with a sense of humor, optimistic, a people's person, able to charm many of those who interacted with him. On the other hand, he had a short temper and when angered, could act without considering all consequences. Ladislaus was criticized for being a spendthrift. He lived lavishly, spending more than his royal court treasury could afford. He also dispensed much wealth among his courtiers, who were seen by people farther from the court as taking advantage of the king. He has also been known to maintain several mistresses throughout his life, including during his married period. Ladislaus had many plans, dynastic, about wars, territorial gains, regaining Silesia, Inflanty, Livonia, incorporation of Ducal Prussia, creation of his hereditary dukedom etc., some of them with real chances of success, but for various reasons, most of them ended in failure during his 16-year reign. Though his grand international political plans failed, he did improve the Commonwealth foreign policy, supporting the establishment of a network of permanent diplomatic agents in important European countries. Throughout his life, Vladislaus successfully defended Poland against foreign invasions. He was recognized as a good tactician and strategist, who did much to modernize the Polish army. Ladislaus ensured that the officer corps was significantly large so that the army could be expanded, introduced foreign, Western, infantry to the Polish army, with its pikes and early firearms, and supported the expansion of the artillery. His attempt to create a Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth Navy resulted in the creation of a new port village, Ladislaus. Despite promising beginnings, Ladislaus failed to secure enough funds for the fleet creation. The ships were gone. The king, while Catholic, was very tolerant and did not support the more aggressive policies of the Counter-Reformation. When he took power, the Senate of Poland had 6 Protestant members. At the time of his death, it had 11. Despite his support for religious tolerance, he did fail, however, to resolve the conflict stemming from the Union of Brest split. Despite his support for the Protestants, he did not stop the growing tide of intolerance, either in Poland or abroad, as shown by the fate of the Rakovian Academy, or an international disagreement between the faiths. Neither did he get involved with the disagreement about the Orthodox Cossacks, a group that he respected and counted on in his plans. In internal politics he attempted to strengthen the power of the monarchy, but this was mostly thwarted by the Szlachta, who valued their independence and democratic powers. Ladislaus suffered continuing difficulties caused by the efforts of the Polish Sejm, parliament, to check the king's power and limit his dynastic ambitions. Ladislaus was fed up with the weak position of the king in the Commonwealth. His politics included attempting to secure a small, preferably hereditary territory, like a duchy, where his position would be much stronger. Ladislaus used the title of the King of Sweden, although he had no control over Sweden whatsoever and never set foot in that country. However, he continued his attempts to regain the Swedish throne, with similar lack of results as his father. He might have been willing to trade his claim away, but the offer was never put down in the negotiations. Some historians see Ladislaus as a dreamer who could not stick to one policy, and upon running into first difficulties, ditched it and looked for another opportunity. Perhaps it was due to this lukewarmness that Vladislaus was never able to inspire those he ruled to support, at least in any significant manner, any of his plans. Ladislaus Zaplensky in his biography of the king is more understanding, noting the short period of his reign, 16 years, and the weakness of the royal position he was forced to deal with. Several years after his death, a diplomatic mission from Muscovy demanded that publications about Vladislaus' victories in the Smolensk War of 1633 to 1634 be collected and burned. Eventually, to much controversy, their demand was met. Polish historian Maciej Roslak noted, under the reign of Vladislaus IV, such a shameful event would have never been allowed. One of the king's most substantial achievements was in the cultural sphere. He became a notable patron of the arts. Ladislaus was a connoisseur of the arts, in particular, theatre and music. He spoke several languages, enjoyed reading historical literature and poetry. He collected paintings and created a notable gallery of paintings in the Warsaw Castle. Ladislaus assembled an important collection of Italian and Flemish Baroque paintings, much of which were lost in the wars after his death. He sponsored many musicians and in 1637 created the first amphitheatre in the palace, the first theatre in Poland, where during his reign dozens of operas and ballets were performed. He is credited with bringing the very genre of opera to Poland. Ladislaus' attention to theatre contributed to the spread of this art form in Poland. He was also interested in poetry, as well as in cartography and historical and scientific works. He corresponded with Galileo. Notable painters and engravers Ladislaus supported and who attended his royal court included Peter Paul Rubens, Thomas O'Doyle, Peter Dankert-Starrige, Wilhelm Hondius, Bartlomiej Strobel, and Christian Mellish. His royal orchestra was headed by Kapellmeister Marko Skaki, seconded by Bartlomiej Bikiel. One of the most renowned works he ordered was the raising of the Sigismund's column in Warsaw. The column, dedicated to his father, was designed by the Italian-born architect Constantino Tencolo and the sculptor Clemente Molli, and cast by Denoil Time. He was less interested in decorative architecture. He supported the construction of two palaces in Warsaw, Kazanowski Palace and Villa Regia. Among other works sponsored by or dedicated to him is Guido Reni's The Rape of Europa,